Hello and welcome to another useless video that's probably going to be cringe. Uh, this is going to be my official uh, Dungeons and Dragons game tier list. It's something I always wanted to do. As a matter of fact, I always wanted to make one of these really silly tier lists that everybody does, and I wanted to do it for several different game types and series. So I'm going to do it for something that I'm very familiar with, which is D&D games. As for the last two videos, if you notice the college course thing, I took it off because they were so cringe that every time I looked at them, for some reason they were getting thumbs up, but I have the sneaking suspicion that people were favoriting them and thumbing them up because I was making an absolute fool out of myself. They were really cringe videos, and also too, they were very negative in some respects, and I'm trying to get away from the whole idea of being negative on this channel. I don't think being negative about games is very good. I think it does the hobby a disservice. I think it drives away fans who would otherwise be driven towards CRPGs, and we shouldn't do that. I understand gatekeeping is a thing, but we shouldn't bombard people with negativity and bad attitudes. So that was on me, and I looked at those videos and I really didn't like them. So whatever. If you saved them and you liked them, fine. But I really don't think anybody did. I don't. I want to do something positive, and so I came up with this idea, which was a tier list essentially of all of the D&D games that matter anyway. It's not going to be all of them because there's some actually that I haven't played. Like the new Dark Alliance, the third Dark Alliance game. I heard it sucked, but I never played it, so I couldn't tell you. The reviews drove me away from it. So what I'm going to do is the major ones in the major series I'm going to have up here on a tier list, and it's going to be my own opinion. It's not going to be fact. It's just going to be what I feel they are. Everybody has a different opinion, a different feeling for certain games, and it's totally cool. But I'm going to show you mine. So, getting started, we'll start with S, and then you go all the way down to F, which I guess we're kind of going with grades, the American grade system, but we have an E, so I don't know. This is the one I downloaded online. It's the one everybody uses, the tier list. So, trying to be as cringe as possible, right? So, first game I want to do is I'm going to cover all of the gold box games as Pool of Radiance. Forgive me for, you know, I'm actually kind of new to this whole tier thing, how people do it with the images. So we'll do Pool of Radiance, and that'll be that'll cover all of the gold box games. So when I put Pool of Radiance up here as the image, that covers Secret of the Silver Blades, Curse of the Azure Bonds, Pool of Darkness, the two Savage Frontier games, Death Knights of Kryn, the whole, that whole kit and caboodle. Now, all of them were great games, and all of them mattered to the D&D pantheon. They created Dungeons and Dragons on the computer, even though Pools of Darkness was incredibly broken, and you basically needed to be on crack cocaine and to play the game 24/7 for about 3 weeks and save scum constantly to get through all the difficult battles that were completely insane and bonkers. But that being the outlier, all the rest of them were pretty good, and they still do hold up to a degree. I think the only problem is that you got two problems. First of all, the manuals have part of the dialogue, and I don't believe that's ever been fixed. It actually asks you to read the manuals to see it was part of the copy protection essentially. Like they say, oh, you enter a cave, open page 85 and read the second paragraph to see what was in the cave. Something like that. Other than that, the games still hold up mostly well. I think the only problem is that they're in dire need of a remaster, and they're probably never going to get one. But still, because the gold box games were so important to not only Dungeons and Dragons but the CRPG genre as a whole, I consider them one of the great, I guess you could say one of the great technical achievements of CRPG game design, in that they move the hobby forward and still stand today as some of the best Dungeons and Dragons games you're going to get. Any of the gold box games, Pool of Radiance, Gateway to the Savage Frontier is good, Death Knights of Krynn. Couldn't recommend them enough. So I'm going to put them in A tier because they certainly are A. I would put them in A. Still hold up, still quite good. Can't really say anything bad about them, other than the fact that they desperately needed remastering. So the next one we're going to do is Eye of the Beholder. And when I say Eye of the Beholder, I'm talking about all three of the main Eye of the Beholder games, even though the third one was not made by Westwood and was kind of sucky. It still was a pretty good game when you compare it to other games of the time. So I'm just going to count them all as one title. So Eye of the Beholder. Eye of the Beholder did move the D&D series forward. It even moved the dungeon crawler subgenre forward too. It created a new subgenre all its own. Eye of the Beholder showed really what Westwood was capable of, and that whole kind of, what do they call it, like the four-headed dragon style of gameplay. It became like a popular offshoot of the Wizardry dungeon crawler. So Eye of the Beholder was a very good game, and still holds up to this day, even in its original DOS form. You could play the original DOS game on DOSBox. The user interface is still pretty normal. I mean, if you play Legend of Grimrock or Vaporum, any of the modern Eye of the Beholder ripoffs, they play almost exactly the same with almost the exact same user interface. So there's really not much to them. They really hold up well. They were important to the subgenre of the dungeon crawler, and they were a very good D&D game. I still play them to this day. I think the DOS versions hold up well. The Super Nintendo port was actually halfway decent. And you can even buy them on Steam, too. They have them as part, I think, the silver... I think they classify them under silver box, but either way, very good games. Highly recommend them. Eye of the Beholder, I would probably rank that... Should I rank it A? I really would rank it A. I think it was is just as influential as Pool of Radiance was, and all the gold box games. So I definitely would rank it A. It's up there. Okay, so let's think. Oh yeah, the Stone Prophet and Strahd's Possession Ravenloft games. So I'm going to count both Strahd's Possession and Stone Prophet as one game, since they not only ran on the same engine, but they also were essentially the same game. The only difference is the Stone Prophet was a little bit slower, and the combat was toned down a little bit to make it more manageable. That was really the only difference. They were both set in Ravenloft, just different areas of the game world. So, yeah, Ravenloft, Strahd's Possession, and Stone Prophet, incredible games. I think they're very... I don't know why, but for some reason they're glossed over. You don't hear many people talk about them. They'll talk about Eye of the Beholder or the Gold Box games, or maybe even mention Temple of Elemental Evil or something like that, but they don't mention Ravenloft. I don't know why. They were really good, and I guess because they came out in that downtime of like around like 93, around 93, 94, because they came out in that downtime, it seems like, since no one was really playing CRPGs at that time, except for the hardcore nerds like me, that the mainstream just never latched onto it, never realized it even existed. To this day, they just, don't realize that it actually existed. The setting was great. It was, I think it was the first D&D computer game to really take advantage of the CD platform. You had fully voiced cinema scenes, fully voiced NPCs. The art was off the scale. I think really out of all the D&D games ever made, the art in Ravenloft was chef's kiss, like absolute best out of all of them. And it's the combat, a little iffy. I mean, first person real time combat in RPG was kind of new at the time. I mean, you had Ultima Underworld, but even its combat was kind of like a little weird. Not exactly the best. So it did well for what it was. It was a bit of a trailblazing game, and it should be remembered for that. I think it's pretty good. It like I said, it is the combat's a little iffy at times, and it didn't really catch on with people for whatever reason. And I guess Ravenloft maybe isn't as popular of a setting as I thought it was, but I always liked it. But because the combat is a little jank and the game ran a little, it still runs a little bad even on today's systems. It just wasn't programmed very well. I'm going to give it a B. I'm going to put it B tier. It was still a very good D&D game, and one of those games I would really recommend to people. But I'm going to put it in B tier, and that goes for Stone Prophet as well. So that engine that they used in Ravenloft, Stone Prophet, and Strahd's Possession was also used in Menzoberranzan. And if you ever heard me talk about Menzoberranzan before, it was not a very good. It was not a very good game. It was extremely watered down when compared to the two Ravenloft games. And not only was it watered down, but it just had this. It was just all brown. By the time you got into the actual dungeons of the game, the actual mazes themselves were incredibly bland. It's like the people designing the game were just told, yeah, you know what, just create the most bland, unimaginative, boring, brown dungeons you possibly can, and we'll just ship it out and make some money. It's a shame, too, because a game where you have Drizzt in your party should be, a little bit better than it was. But even if you compare the animations of Menzoberranzan to Stone Prophet or Strahd's Possession, it's like night and day. The animations in Menzoberranzan are just absolutely god awful. They're like at 2 frames a second. The voice acting is even bad. It's like they rushed it out of the door just to make money. It's part of the. I'm not going to say it's part of the reason, but it's kind of like a side effect of what happened with the CRPG falling out of favor with computer users in the mid 90s. And because of that, it really suffered. It was, I guess, a cash-in game, essentially, and it's mostly irredeemable. I do like the fact that, the combat was actually a little bit improved over Stone Prophet, but it doesn't matter because the actual game itself was garbage tier. So I would give it an E. We'll put it down here in E. Okay. Now, let's here's one of the most controversial D&D games. We'll put in the tier list. 1998's Descent to Undermountain. Descent to Undermountain, I actually bought that Christmas. Was it the Christmas of '98? I thought it might have been the Christmas of '97 or early '98 when I bought the game. But let me get a box art for it here. It was funny because it was a game in which Interplay was trying to establish themselves as a major player in the RPG genre again, and in D&D especially. So what they did was they tried to make a 3D modern, and it was supposed to be multiplayer originally. They tried to make a modern D&D first-person RPG, but they failed miserably at it. They used the Descent engine, and not even the Descent 2, but the original Descent engine, which wasn't hardware accelerated, which was really stupid. I don't know why they did that. If somebody knows why, tell me in the comments. But it was just an absolute failure. They rushed it out of the door, and because of that, they put a sticker on the box, because originally the back of the box said multiplayer and that you needed a 28.8 modem to play. But what they did was they put a sticker over that part of the box that blocked the need for a modem. But if you pulled the sticker off the box, like I did, because I was a ornery bastard, you would see that it originally was, when they printed the boxes, it was meant to be a multiplayer dungeon hack. That shows you how rushed the game was. It was go, if you're watching this, pause the video and go find some gameplay of Descent to Undermountain. The gameplay is just absolutely abysmal. I will say the soundtrack is good, and the soundtrack was actually used. Many of the many of the tunes in the game were used for Baldur's Gate a year later, but soundtrack doesn't make the game. Pretty much everything else about the game was just an utter disaster. It is by far one of the worst games ever made, if not one of the worst D&D games ever made, if not one of the worst games ever made, period. So it is clearly absolute trash tier, and we're putting it F, even below Menzo Baranzan. If you can believe it. You know, if you don't believe me, just, look at some videos of it on YouTube and you'll see what I mean. Absolutely horrible. Okay, so next, another game I want to include on our tier list is Dungeon Hack. Dungeon Hack was a bit of a cash-in game too. SSI was trying to trying to get something out of that old Eye of the Beholder formula. So they took the same engine that they used in Eye of the Beholder and figured they would make a procedurally generated dungeon game. So it was basically a cheap way for them to say, like, look, the single player is just random dungeons that you create. Isn't that fun? That way we don't have to hand create dungeons. You'll just do them yourself. Now, because of that, the game doesn't really have much replayability. It kind of gets boring after a while because there's no story, there's no cutscenes, there's no nothing. It's just basically you rolling up a random character, going into a random dungeon, killing random monsters, and getting random loot. That being said, it's not that bad. It's just really bland because the entire game is all randomization. So if you like Eye of the Beholder and always thought it would be cool just to play a random dungeon in Eye of the Beholder that has no storyline, and you're just fighting random monsters and getting random loot, then hey, this is your dream game. It's not that bad, but it does get boring quick, so I'm going to put that on D tier. Not terrible. I mean, I actually do have some fond memories of it. When I was in high school, this one guy that was in my D&D group, Tim, I always wondered what happened to him. I wish I hadn't treated him so bad. He was a cool dude. He really was. He knew his D&D. He was all right. I remember him or one of his friends told me that he was a big fan of Dungeon Hack. So it's not really that bad of a game. It's just repetitive and kind of bland. So, make of that what you will, right? Okay, so let's go on. Of course, the next game you're probably pretty aware of is Baldur's Gate. We'll introduce that on the tier list here. The original Baldur's Gate, which I got Christmas Eve of 1998. Good memories there. If you saw my video about it, you know that Baldur's Gate, whether you want to admit it or not, pretty much not only revitalized and resurrected, but completely reimagined the CRPG genre on the PC. So you have to give it credit for that, even if you personally don't like the game. And I know a lot of people who are even more hardcore and even more old fogey than I am, they don't like it. I still think that Baldur's Gate is a prime example of how good D&D can be in a computerized format. And if you ask my opinion, I would say that no matter what they do in the future, no matter how many other Baldur's Gate games they make, I don't think they'll ever really get a game that changes gaming as much as the original did. Because that was such a huge atomic bomb. And really, even if we don't count the things that it did for the genre as a whole, it's actually really a good game that holds up even today. 26 years later, people still play it. People still mod it. And it's still talked about. And for good reason. It really is a good game. It is, in my opinion, the one game. If you have never played a CRPG before, you're completely new to the genre, I would tell you to play Baldur's Gate 1 first. That's the very first game I would tell you to play. It's sort of like if you've never played a JRPG before, your best bet would be like Dragon Quest 3. I would tell you to play Dragon Quest 3 would be your first JRPG you should start with. That's sort of what Baldur's Gate is to the CRPG. It's like that one introductory game that you've just got to play because it teaches you everything you need to know about the genre. And it still holds up, and it's still fun. It has a great soundtrack. The art design, one of the best drawn games. I mean, a lot of it is, old pixels and, CGI backgrounds, but it actually works. I mean, this was 1998 with a company that had made their first game and didn't have, a super high budget. But for what they were able to do, they pulled off the impossible and made a truly god tier game. So we're putting that in S tier. Deservedly, right? Now, what about, I know what you guys are probably saying, what about Baldur's Gate 2, right? Now, Baldur's Gate 2 actually, if you want to get down to it, I think it's actually better than the first game. I prefer the first game's overworld, how they have it set up with the how you go to little squares basically in the map. But I will accept the fact that Baldur's Gate 2 has one of the best plot lines in a CRPG, and it definitely has the greatest villain in a CRPG in John Arenicus. And it has one of the best video games. I would consider the three greatest video. If you ask me what the three greatest video game soundtracks of all time were, I would say Deus Ex, Phantasy Star Online for the Dreamcast, the original one, and Baldur's Gate 2. Those were the three best gaming soundtracks that I ever heard in my life. Here's something. You want to hear something cringe? Because I'm all about being cringe and old. When Baldur's Gate 2 came out, I used to have this huge Iowa sound system, a 3-disc changer inside of it, and I put the soundtrack CD in my stereo, and I would fall asleep to the soundtrack. How's that for incredibly cringe and pathetic? That being said, amazing game. Still holds up today. Still one of the absolute best examples of the CRPG genre. I don't care how elitist you are, you have to admit that. You just have to. And if you can't admit it, then I'm sorry, you're lying to yourself. It is an absolute S tier game. Belongs up there with the first one. Okay, so we're moving on. The next game I want to talk about is a favorite of the community, one of the most beloved D&D games, and that's Planescape Torment. Now, those who know me know that I've had quite a history with this game. I've never liked it. I do accept what it is. I know that people really like the story. They really like the idea of being immortal and coming back to life, and they like the idea of walking around in Sigil and getting to be in a non-conventional world with non-conventional party members. and a non-conventional character progression system, which is cool. You know, I'm down with that. I'm all about the non-conventional stuff. But to be completely honest, I don't think it's really that good of a game. If you like choose your own adventure games and you like a lot of dialogue, you'd probably enjoy it. But the brunt of the game's combat is all at the end. The game is very dialogue heavy and front loaded. Maybe I should say it's back loaded because that's where the combat is at the tail end of the game. But yeah, it's to me it's just too wordy. I've been criticized by many people online through the years for not liking this game, and they tell me that I'm unintelligent, I'm a brute, I'm a caveman. I had one guy on RPG Dot, that old website. Uh, One guy said I must be. This was back in the early 2000s. He said that you must be a fan of George Bush. Then you must be a Republican because you're a dumb illiterate jackass. So you know, and at the time I was liberal. So I don't know. I just said I don't understand how not liking this game makes me stupid. I like a story as much as the next guy, but I need to have some combat. And when I'm playing a game for 10, 15, 20 hours, and I've only been in combat a total of like 5 minutes, and I've been doing nothing but reading dialogue boxes, I'm going to sleep. I'm tired. You know, that just bores me to tears. So, although I do respect what Torment did and how people love it because it's so non conventional, I don't really care for it. And for that, I would rank it about a C. I would put it C on the tier list. I don't really think it's that good. I think people just like the game because it makes them feel that they're intelligent. I hate to be negative because I don't want to be negative or cringe anymore, but that's just the way I feel about it. That's just my opinion. Alright. So, moving on, we'll go to another Infinity Engine game, and that is the first Icewind Dale. Let's see, I need to find a box art for... Oh, there we go. So we have the first Icewind Dale. Icewind Dale is another game that's a little bit controversial to D&D fans, to CRPG fans too, is because basically they took the Infinity Engine from Baldur's Gate and they decided to gut away most of the game's story and have you make a full 6-person party, and there were no NPCs. And since unlike Baldur's Gate 1 and 2 there are no NPCs, that means there's kind of... Actually, there's quite a bit less interaction than there is in the other games. And a lot of the old heads, a lot of the elitist guys like me, they don't like it for that reason because they see it as being very plain. And it's just basically a dungeon crawler that's 99% combat. And they're not wrong. Icewind Dale is like 99% combat and 1% dialogue. For that reason, I like it. You know, I thought a lot of the battles in the game, especially the boss battles, like against Sonomy, the snake woman, I think a lot of the boss battles in the game were very challenging and well thought out. And it's actually one of the better D&D games. And it doesn't get a lot of respect. It doesn't get a lot of appreciation from D&D fans. But yet me, I think it holds up. And it's one of those games that I can't even imagine not having installed on my computer. I have it installed on my computer right now. You know, it's one of those first, like one of the first games I install whenever I get a new PC. It's going on there with the 2 Baldur's Gate games. So for me, I consider this A tier. Definitely A tier. Let's fit that in there. So that's Icewind Dale. Now, the other one would be Icewind Dale 2. Which you might think, oh, is there any real difference between the two of them? Actually, there's quite a bit of a difference. Now, Icewind Dale 2, I think, was a bit of a response to the first game, to the complaints people had of it. Because although you can still make a 6-person party in Icewind Dale 2, there's still not much of interaction. Like, you make the 6-person party, so there's no NPCs and they don't talk to each other. But there is still a story. As a matter of fact, Izair and Medei, the villains of the game, are actually two of the best well-written villains in CRPGs. I would put them up there with John Irenicus. And the last battle that you fight with them and their army, it's truly epic. It's one of my favorite end boss battles in an RPG. Icewind Dale 2 also used the third. I don't know if it used third or 3.5, but it used like third edition D&D games in the Infinity Engine. And as the last Infinity Engine game, it has that unfortunate distinction of being the game that ended an era of CRPGs. It was really good. It was full of combat, great soundtrack, great art. It was much more challenging than the first Icewind Dale. And for that reason alone, I like it better than the original. But see, here's the problem. The game doesn't run very well on modern systems. There's a fan-made mod that's attempting to make a complete edition of the game, and I downloaded the fan-made mod, and it crashed constantly. So it's sad. I would really love to go through Icewind Dale 2 again because I've only actually beaten it once. But I'm on bleh. I just came home from work and I ate. My mouth is dry, so excuse me. But I am unable to because I can't get it to run on any of my computers. I have 4 computers right now, and 3 of them run Windows 10, and 1 is running Windows 7, and none of them can get the executable to stay stable for more than like half an hour. So, but still, a very good game, and I wish we could all play it again. I will rank that as an A-tier game, without a doubt. Very good game. Very good game. So, that's, what other thing could we put in here? Oh yeah, I'm thinking of older games, you know. There's also another game that I want to talk about, Hillsfar, which was actually, although Pool of Radiance was the first D&D game for my Commodore 64 that I beat, Hillsfar was actually the first one that I ever had. It was actually given to me by a guy that worked with my dad, and he pirated games, I guess, on the side. He used to make money by pirating them and selling them. This was back in the late 80s, early 90s, so, you know, it's not like the FBI was showing up at his house. And one of the first games he gave me was Hillsfar. And Hillsfar was interesting, but it was just mainly mini games. It had an arena mini game where you fought monsters. It had you traveled to town riding a horse and you had to jump over obstacles. You had like a lock-picking mini game, and you had like a mini game where you had to run into people's houses and steal stuff. It was weird. I used to play it, and I kind of enjoyed it for a little bit. But then again, I was like 13 years old, and I also enjoyed picking my boogers. So it's kind of relative. Nowadays, I would never think of playing it because it's just so stupid and silly. But when I was a kid, and it was the first D&D game I ever played, I actually thought it was kind of neat. So I'd probably put it around like E tier, along with Menzo Baranzan. I mean, it might be fun to play the arena minigame because that was actually kind of cool. But beyond that, it wasn't very fun. Alright, another game I'd like to talk about. I'm not doing these in chronological order. But one game I would really like to talk about and put on this tier list is Siege of Dragonspear, which was the game that Beamdog made that chronologically happens in between Baldur's Gate 1 and 2. The sad thing is, they could have made a really good game here that would have moved them up as a company and probably given them the rights to make Baldur's Gate 3. But because this game was such a disaster, it probably killed any chance of them ever being involved in the Baldur's Gate franchise ever again. I mean, it was filled with fourth wall breakage. And I know a lot of people said, well, there's fourth wall breakage in BG 1 and 2, so why is it unacceptable in Dragonspear? Well, the problem is in Dragonspear, it's right out in the open. You got one of the NPCs that can join you, the Goblin Lady. She talks about feminism, and I think like talks about you being a misogynist to her, and they changed the personality of Safana and made her like a hardcore man hater. And they did a whole bunch of other things. I'm not going to get into it. You can see the reviews of the game and see it yourself. But even without all of the weird kind of fourth wall breakage and the horrible script, even if you took that aside and just viewed the game on its merits, it's abysmal. The game has random fights that constantly pop up on the map, and they're usually of enemies that create status effects or auto poison, and it gets so annoying when you're trying to just walk to the next area on the map and you get randomly attacked by 7 wargs and they all poison you. It's just very poorly laid out. It's incredibly unbalanced. The story is incredibly simplistic. The main characters are so dumb. It was just a clusterfuck, is what it was. And it killed any chance of Beamdog ever making another BG game. What's sad is I actually own the collector's edition of it. I paid $250, pre-purchased it about a year before it came out, to get a collector's edition, and it ended up being that horrible. So I'm actually going to put that down with Descent to Undermountain. It's a game that I wouldn't even recommend playing. It shouldn't even exist. So if you're looking for a game to play in the Baldur's Gate pantheon and you see that game on Steam for sale, just don't buy it. Just pretend it never exists, okay? You just don't want to buy it. All right. So we'll just we'll move on. We'll get away from that. Another cool game, since we're talking about Baldur's Gate, is Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance. Originally, I think it was a PS2, and it was also a GameCube game. I think it did come out on the GameCube as well. But now you can buy it on PC. I think you can buy it on Steam and GOG. I think GOG also has it. But anyway, it was. I don't want to say this because it's going to sound bad, but it was a dumbing down of the Baldur's Gate formula to make it more like a Diablo clone. And he actually did a really good job with it. I mean, it's funny. Snowblind, I think that was the name of the engine that they used, or the name of the company, High Voltage. Yeah, Snowblind Studios. They were a division of Interplay, I believe, and they made these games, these 2 Dark Alliance games, and they're actually pretty good. They hold up more or less even today. They also made 2 games on the based in the EverQuest pantheon too, which were also very good. But Dark Alliance, you don't see too many people talk about that. It's a Baldur's Gate Diablo clone, and it's pretty cool. I highly recommend it. It's probably pretty cheap on Steam. It's not very long. You could probably beat the game in a weekend. Might only take you about 20 hours. But it'll be a fun 20 hours, and it has a good New Game Plus mode. Compared to like Diablo 2, it's got about the same kind of depth. It's not something that's like going to break your balls. Like it's not Dark Souls level hard. But it's not completely easy either. It's pretty even keeled. I think it's a game that deserves more respect and recognition for what it was. I actually put it, I kind of want to put it on B tier. You know what? I am going to put it on B tier. I really love the 2 Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance games. I do think, though, that the second Dark Alliance game is actually better. It was a better game slightly. And the only reason I say that is because Dark Alliance 2 had more characters you could play as. The first game had 3 and the second game had 5. And one of them happened to be a Dark Elf monk. And that was my favorite character to play as. So yeah, they were pretty good, and I'll put them in B tier. They were very fun. And you know, here's the funny thing about Dark Alliance. I always felt that if Interplay or whoever owns the rights to them now um, wanted money, they could take these games and remaster them. I mean, truly remaster them and make them online, completely online, like they were Diablo 4, you know. Maybe combine them both and give them a total rethink. Because I think the core idea there was actually pretty good. I think if they were to redo them and make them completely online, dude, it would sell like gangbusters. I think now's the time to do that too, with Baldur's Gate being in the public conscience again because of Baldur's Gate 3. Now would be a perfect time to make like a true Dark Alliance sequel. Not the one that we got a couple years ago, but like a true Dark Alliance sequel that has seamless online play and leaderboards and PvP and all that happy horse shit. I think that would be like an instant money maker. Excuse me, I just ate. Would be an instant money maker. And the fact that no one's done it yet shows that I guess people are allergic to money. So, yeah. Anyway, moving on. The next game I want to talk about is Pool of Radiance 2. Ruins of Myth Janor. Now, I actually bought this game, and I do have the collector's edition that came out for it. I remember when this came out, I actually got into a fight with a friend of mine at the time, someone I knew online, and we used to play games together, because he hated it, and I liked it, and he told me, he said, the only reason you like Pool of Radiance 2 is because it's turn-based. That's not a good enough reason to like it. And we got into like a big fight over it. I know, it's so pathetic and cringe. I wish I hadn't, because he was a cool dude. But he was right. The only reason I did like it when it came out is because it was turn-based. The truth is, it's an absolute steaming pile of monkey crap. The game is incredibly unbalanced. You fight the same like 3 monsters throughout the entirety of the game. The soundtrack repeats endlessly when it even does play. The rules are completely broken. You can't even select your feats. They give power attack to mages for some reason. Like, the game is so anti-D&D that it isn't even really a D&D game. You can't really make characters. You can't do anything. It's a dungeon crawl with very little, if any, plot, hardly any NPCs, and it's the most ridiculous game I've ever played. It's so unbalanced and so plain vanilla and so boring. It is absolute garbage. That being said, the game came with the novelization, and the book actually isn't that bad. I remember reading the book many, many years later. This is a true story. This game came out in 2001, late 2001. I would say about, God, when was it? It was right before, probably, I'm going to say sometime around 2011 or so. I was bored and needed a book to read, and I was going through my old boxed PC collection, and I found the book for Pool of Radiance inside the box, and I said, you know what, I need a book to read, let's read it. I sat down and read it cover to cover in one day, and it was actually really good. The main character, Kestrel, was so cool. I thought, like, if only the game could have been done by the lady who wrote this book, then it might actually have been good. But yeah, what happened with the game is it was originally supposed to be a second edition D&D game, but the developers were told by Wizards of the Coast or whoever owned it at the time, they told them that they had to convert it to 3rd edition before the game came out, and they had like less than 3 months to do so. So they had to convert a 2nd edition game to 3rd edition, and that's why it's so disjointed, unbalanced, and broken. Or so that's what they say. I don't know. But either way, it's an absolute trash game, and it goes in the F tier. It's sad for me to say that, because that was a game that I was really looking forward to, when it came out. All right. So next game will go. Now I'm going to talk about Neverwinter Nights, but I'm not talking about the one from the Gold Box era back in the 90s. I'm talking about the one that BioWare made. That Neverwinter Nights. I'm going to use... Well, should I use the Enhanced Edition box? I'm trying to find the box art for the darn thing. Oh, well, it doesn't really matter. So, yeah, the first Neverwinter Nights. Neverwinter Nights, I really enjoyed. When it came out, I actually wasn't really into online RPGs. I had had a sour taste in my mouth from my experience with EverQuest. So I wasn't really into them. It was actually the game that made me think that, yeah, especially with their persistent world servers, I thought, yeah, an online RPG can work. And I still consider it one of the best online role-playing games that money can buy. Its persistent world servers were incredibly fun. The single-player story was kind of passable, but there were a ton of mods for the game, like Sunless Citadel, the remake of Eye of the Beholder, Forge of Fury was another good one. There's Dreamcatcher and the Shadowlands series. There were a lot of player-made mods for the original Neverwinter Nights that were just leaps and bounds above anything else that we were getting in the CRPG genre. Really good stuff. I played it for years, just downloading player-made stuff. It was really good. Because of that, I consider it one of the most influential CRPGs of all time, because I think it showed people how to do an online role-playing game that isn't an MMO, right? It, in that respect, was very revolutionary. And I think it still does hold up. I mean, if you were to buy it on Steam, you could go and download hundreds of player-made stories and play for years and be entertained. And I think that's a pretty good deal for your dollar. So I would consider Neverwinter Nights to be A tier. Even had good combat. I think its combat, it was kind of what KOTOR was based on, but I think it did a really good job with it. Now, that being said, as good as that was, we have Neverwinter Nights 2 that came out years later. And unfortunately with Neverwinter Nights 2, the developer, because Atari told them, their publisher, Atari told them that the single-player portion of Neverwinter Nights 1 was played more than the multiplayer. Guess which part they decided to focus on? That's right. They focused on the single-player. So although the game had an incredible single-player story that was very involved, and even had some great single-player DLC like Mask of the Betrayer, it didn't have persistent world servers. Its online was set up so that you had to download everybody's hack pack to play on their server. It wasn't like the first Neverwinter Nights, where if someone had a unique mod or a hack pack on their server, the content was automatically streamed to your computer. No, they did away with that. The netcode wasn't good enough, so you had to go and download like a 2 gig content pack just to play on some guy's server in East Bumblefuck, Missouri. And because of that, it really killed the online portion of the game. The single player is good. Don't get me wrong, the single player is good. If you want a good single player D&D game, go and download Neverwinter Nights 2. But the multiplayer, they completely killed it. For that reason, I think it suffers a bit, and I'll give it C tier. I do think it's still a good game, and I do recommend it. I just think that because of that... actually, let me give it B tier, because it's a lot better than Planescape. That wouldn't be fair. I'm going to give it B tier. It's still a fun game. That single player is so good, especially Mask of the Betrayer is one of my favorite pieces of DLC that was ever made for a video game. So, yeah, I'd give it B tier. It's not as good as the first game, because the first game had that killer online component. I don't know how much of that online component works nowadays. Probably not that much, I'm guessing. But whatever. Oh yeah, another game. Speaking of Neverwinter Nights, Believe it or not, I don't know if any of you guys know this. There's actually a Neverwinter Nights MMO, and I did play it once. It's still being played. It's mainly it's mainly on the Xbox. There's where I see a lot of people playing it. It's like a console. I think it's a Korean made one. I'm not too sure. I did play it briefly on PC, and I wasn't really that big of a fan of it. I felt, as far as MMOs go, it was kind of bland, and even worse, it was pay to win. So I did think the combat was pretty good and the art direction was nice, but the actual gameplay itself, because of that pay to win aspect, it wasn't very good. So I'm gonna put it on E tier. I still, whenever I see the game pop up and someone will talk about it in some forum or whatever, I cringe a little bit because I think of how they could have made a much better D&D game. So, speaking of which, there's actually another online MMORPG with Dungeons and Dragons in mind, and that's Dungeons and Dragons Online. Now, I did play that briefly, and although it wasn't pay to win like Neverwinter, it was not really that good. I didn't enjoy it. I felt that it was more of like I don't want to say choose your own adventure, but all the dungeons were just like little tiny snippets of like 5 to 10 minute pieces of gameplay, and then you would beat them, and then to level grind you would play the same dungeon over again, and then do it over again, and then do it over again. It was very unimaginative and boring, so I wasn't feeling it at all. I did think that the combat was pretty decent as well as the level progression, but everything else in the game was just absolute garbage. So I'm going to put that on E. I think it had potential. Just like to this day, I feel that there should be a D&D game online, but I have yet to see a good one. If you guys know of one that I've never heard of, let me know, because I've never seen one. So yeah, we'll leave it at that. Another game that maybe some people might have never heard of before, but I bought when it came out and I had high hopes for, was Sword Coast Legends. Sword Coast Legends came out in 2015, and I guess it was part of the decline of CRPGs. I did write a review for it. You can check it out sometime. You know what's sad is it had some really cool characters, and I think it was using the 4th edition D&D, I'm not sure. It had some cool party members, and the voice work was good. Soundtrack was kind of nice. The graphics were okay. The combat was serviceable for a real-time-ish combat system. However, what really bothered me about the game was how incredibly bland and uninteresting the level progression was. There was no way to really like min-max. It's just there was a skill tree, but it was a very anemic skill tree. I don't even remember because it's been years I played this game, but I remember going through as a paladin, and it was like the most uninteresting level progression for a paladin that I've ever played in an RPG. It wasn't that the game was hard, it was actually quite easy, but it was just so bland. I mean, it was completely devoid of anything that made, say, Baldur's Gate or Icewind Dale or Ravenloft. It was devoid of anything that made those games so unique and fun. It just felt like a paint-by-the-numbers RPG. It was so totally bland. So much so that 8-9 years later, I can barely tell you anything about it, and I beat the game. And I probably spent about 50 hours playing it, and it was just so uninteresting. There was an evil cult that was worshiping a demon that you had to fight. That's it. That was the plot. You belong to this guild, and you find out the guild is like the Illuminati, like the D&D version of the Illuminati, and they're worshiping a demon, and you got to go and kill that demon. that's the plot. And you go to the Underdark and fight some fights and do some silly fetch quests, and it just was really bland, you know. So I'd probably put it E tier. It could have been a lot better. Also, could have been a lot worse. It could have been Pool of Radiance 2 or Dragon Sphere, but we'll just put that on E tier. Okay, so what other games can we talk about? Oh yeah, that's right. What was that one game for the Xbox? I'm trying to think of. Oh yeah. That's right. Dungeons and Dragons Heroes. Yeah, this is another game. Probably a lot of you guys never. I think it also came out on the GameCube. I think later it was ported to the GameCube, but it originally came out on the Xbox. I still own a copy. This was actually secretly one of the best action RPGs ever made, but very few people played it for whatever reason. It was made by Brenda Braithwaite, the lady who was one of the head designers for Wizardry 8 for Surtec. For whatever reason, she also married John Romero. I think she could have done better. But, yeah, she made this game, and it's actually one of the best D&D action games that you'll ever play. It's very much like Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance, only it's about 3 times longer, and there's a lot more combat. It's more like Gauntlet. Let me just say it like it's more like Gauntlet, whereas Dark Alliance is more like Diablo, D&D Heroes is more like a Gauntlet kind of style. Huge monster mobs, it's less about gaining experience and more about, beating the crap out of monsters. It's a very visceral, very addictive game. It's just I don't even know how to describe it. I wish I could play it again, but my original Xbox is crapped. I ought to see if the Xbox Series X can play this backwards compatible. I think maybe after this video I'm going to pop it in my Series X and see if it'll work. Because this was a really good game. And it's one of those games that I feel really needs a remaster, but it's probably never going to get one. So because it's addicting, I'm going to put it up here with on B tier. I know a lot of people wouldn't agree with that, but I've always been a big fan of it. So we're going to put that up there on B tier. Let's see, what other games do we... Oh, yeah, that's right. I'm forgetting about another game. There's another game that came out for the TurboGrafx called Order of the Griffin, which used the original first edition D&D rules. And I know what you're thinking, the TurboGrafx? Who the hell has a TurboGrafx? Well, I had a TurboGrafx growing up, and I got this game, I think it came out in late 92, if I'm thinking correct. Because I know I was in 11th grade, and my dungeon master, Patrick, was one of 2 dungeon masters in my D&D group, and he really loved the game too, and I used to talk with him about it all the time. Order of the Griffin was really good. It was made by Westwood, the same guys that made Eye of the Beholder and Lands of Lore and all that. But even beyond that, because Westwood was a great game developer, it took a system that maybe wasn't the most powerful console at the time, but it juiced a lot out of it. It had great graphics, large quest, incredible dungeons, great turn-based combat. It's truly one of the best role-playing games that I've ever played in my life. Is it wonky? Yes, it's a little wonky. I'm not going to lie. It's a little imbalanced in parts. Because there's no auto map, it's very easy to get lost if you're not making your own maps or using some online. And the overworld has random encounters, so you can level grind too if you want. And probably the worst thing about the game is it randomly rolls your hit points on level up, so it's entirely possible to get a level up with your fighter and get 2 hit points. So what you have to do is save the game before you level up and save scum, and keep reloading until you get the level up you want. That being said, even though that is annoying, it's still one of the best D&D games that I ever played. And yes, they did steal the art from this game and use the same box art in Descent to Undermountain 6 years later. But just ignore that. Order of the Griffin is a terrific game. Very underrated. And it deserves a lot more credit than it actually gets. So we're going to put that on A tier. It belongs on A. It's great, and I think if you're willing to download the ROM and play on an emulator, I would highly recommend it. It's an experience that every D&D fan should experience, even though it's a console game. Even though it's a console game, it's still a good D&D experience. Which brings me to another D&D game that came out for a console and was only on a console. And that's the Sega Genesis game, which came out around the same time, the same year. Dungeons and Dragons, Warriors of the Eternal Sun. This was also a very good game. What was neat about it is the dungeons in the game were like real time and were kind of like Eye of the Beholder. But when you went to the overworld, the enemies were fought in a turn-based mode. Well, like a quasi turn-based mode. It was a really underrated game, and it's one of those weird games that people don't really talk about. Like, you never hear. It's very rare that you hear people talk about Warriors of the Eternal Sun. I thought it was very underrated. It had a engine that kind of made it look like the mid '90s Ultima games. Like, it looks like Ultima 6 in its graphics, and that's a compliment, not an insult. Overall, it was pretty good. I mean, I consider it to be close to Order of the Griffin. I still think Order of the Griffin is better because it's a more tactical, truer to the rule set game. Whereas Warriors of the Eternal Sun was kind of watered down a bit, I think because they wanted to get the mainstream into D&D. But that being said, even though it's a little easy and a little watered down and it's easy to level grind, especially in the dungeons where the enemies respawn, still, that being the case, it's still pretty good and should be remade or remastered. It's just a shame it never will be. So I'm going to put that in B tier. That was a pretty good game. Okay, oh, yeah, that's another thing I forgot. The Dark Sun games, which came after the Gold Box era. Now, there was Dark Sun Shattered Lands and there was Dark Sun Wake of the Ravager. They were essentially the same game, only Wake of the Ravager was a bit harder. But they were essentially the same game. So I'm just going to group them together. Dark Sun, it's kind of funny because although I liked them, they didn't really resonate with me too much. There were quite a few people when I was playing Diablo, early 97, mid 97. I remember having discussions with people that I played with the game. I would play online with them and we would have discussions sometimes. And they would tell me how much they loved Dark Sun. I met this one guy who was like, it was his favorite game of all time. He even played Dark Sun online. Apparently there was an online version of Dark Sun. I never played it, but apparently there was. And he said it was his favorite online game until he got Diablo. So, but Dark Sun wasn't that bad. I mean, like Planescape, it was a game that took place in a not too used world. Like, the world of Dark Sun was not something you saw very often, and you still don't. No one really talks about it, so a bunch of mutant dudes and bug men running around in armor made of bones, and nothing's made of metal. Like, metal's very scarce in the Dark Sun world, so mostly everything's made with bone or chitin. You know, the armor plates from bugs. It wasn't that bad. You know, the music I thought was kind of repetitive, and the combat was unbalanced, especially towards the end, but not that bad. Not that bad. Would I ever go through it again? No. I don't think it really holds up. I know some people would really curse me for saying this because they adore the game, but for me, it doesn't really hold up to the test of time. There's so much better D&D games. But still not that bad of a game. I'd probably put it on C. I think because it was buggy too, might change the way that I think about the game. Because the first game would always crash for me a lot. So, yeah, whatever. Everybody has their own opinion, and it's, like I said, buttholes. Now, there was another game that came out for the PSP, which I still own. It's kind of rare, I guess. But D&D Tactics. That was another one that came out. D&D Tactics was essentially what the name says. It was a tactics RPG, like Final Fantasy Tactics or Ogre Battle Tactics. Same sort of thing. It was a turn-based war game, sort of D&D game shoehorned in. I never beat it. I maybe got about half of the way through. What really turned me off about it was how slow it was. Battles were incredibly long and slow, and worse yet, your hit points were decided by dice rolls. So like Order of the Griffin, it was one of those games where if you, it's entirely possible for like your fighter to go up a level and only get 2 hit points instead of 12. And unlike Order of the Griffin, where you could save the game right before a level up, in this game you couldn't, because I don't think there were any in-fight saves. So you would have to go through the entire fight again if you didn't like your level up. I thought it was very unbalanced and very poorly thought out. I also thought the graphics, even for a PSP game, were pretty bad. I do think the idea was nice. I thought it would be great to have a D&D Tactics game. The problem is, it was not a very good implementation of it. So, I'm not saying I wouldn't play it again. If someone could iron out the glitches in the game and the fact that you gain hit points via dice roll, I would probably rank it a little bit higher. But if I'm being honest with myself, I'd probably put a D rank. I think it was a good idea, and it could be fun in small amounts, but I kind of want to put it E. You know what? I'm going to put it in E. Because I think Dungeon Hack is a much better game, and putting it up here with Dungeon Hack actually is an insult to Dungeon Hack. So yeah, I'm gonna put it there. Okay. So yeah, D&D Tactics, wasn't really the biggest fan of it. But there's another game that I was a fan of, and that's D&D Tower of Doom, which for the longest time was only an arcade game. But nowadays you can actually get it on Steam, and they remastered it for PC. So it's a beat 'em up with some very slight RPG aspects to it. I'm trying not to make these videos cringe, but I'm gonna make some cringe statements here. When that game came out in the arcade, it came out in the arcade in '94, which was the year I graduated. And our arcade had Tower of Doom. I believe it was right in between an NBA Jam machine and Golden Axe Return of Death Adder. And I always used to play this game. Matter of fact, I would go to the arcade just to spend hours and like 10, 15, 20 bucks a weekend playing that game. I would save up all my money all week just to play it. And I remember in my yearbook, my friend Mike at the end made some kind of comment implying that he said something like, "I hope your marriage to Tower of Doom goes well." Because he figured I played the game so much I might as well be married to it because I gave so much money to it. But really, it was good. I mean, it's one of my favorite beat-em-ups of all time. And I'm including Shadow of Mystara, the sequel. I'm including this in with it. I'm considering them to be one whole game because they're basically the same thing. I think if you like beat-em-ups and you like D&D, this is your dream game because it's that good. It's that good. I wish I had a few friends that liked beat 'em ups so that we could play it together. So yeah, it's good. I would rank it. Where would I rank it? I'd probably say I'd rank it A tier. I think even though it's a beat 'em up and not technically an RPG, it's still one of the best D&D games ever made. And I know that's, a lofty that's a lofty thing, but yeah, it actually was pretty darn good. And it's very underrated as well. Now, there's a lot of games that I wanted to include in here, and I could go on forever. Like, for instance, there's, what is it? Dungeons and Dragons. What was that one game called? Not online. There was Fantasy Empires. There was, I'm trying to think what that one game, Eberron. It was like, then there was Birthright, and there's like all these games I might have only played for like 3 minutes because they were just so boring and I passed on them. So I don't really feel right reviewing certain games because I never really played too much of them. So I'm just gonna, like Idle Champions of the Forgotten Realms, stuff like that. Or Lords of Waterdeep, which was a iOS game. There might have been games that I like toyed around in a few times, like Dungeons and Dragons Daggerdale. I've never actually played anything more than the demo for that game, and that was like 13 years ago or so. So I'm not going to put them on this list because it really wouldn't be fair. So I guess the next thing that we're going to do would be to put... What other games haven't we put on here? I mean, there's Baldur's Gate 3. That's the big one. There's Demon Stone, which I never really played too much. I guess that's what we'll do. I guess that's the last one, Baldur's Gate 3. So I'm actually just trying to make a good video here, which is a hard thing to do. So Baldur's Gate 3, I think it definitely was a great addition to the D&D pantheon. I think it definitely moved the reputation of D&D up quite a bit, and now a lot of people who maybe weren't into D&D are now into D&D, if that makes sense. It sort of had the same effect that the first Baldur's Gate did, and I like it. Don't get me wrong. But I do think that its greatness is overinflated a little bit. I think that it's a game that is kind of front-loaded. The first act is really just the only decent part of the game. The second act is kind of like, eh. And the third act is just nothing but a bunch of combat-heavy scenarios thrown in at the end very rushedly. Is that a word? Rushedly? And I also don't like the fact that it kind of retcons a lot of things, like the true identity of Baldurin. That's a bit of a spoiler, so I'm not going to tell you anything more than that. But if you beat the game, you know what I'm talking about. What they did to Baldurin and who they revealed him to be. I was quite upset about that because it doesn't make sense. Really doesn't. If you think it does, explain to me in the comments, because time-wise and lore-wise, it doesn't make sense to me. When they revealed who Baldurin really was, no. You mean to tell me the Baldur's Gate, the guy who they talked about in Tales of the Sword Coast? Yeah. No. I do like the combat. I think it had great combat. I think it was a game that I'm happy that it was made, but it's not something... I don't think I'll ever play through it again. I really don't. I uninstalled the game after spending about a couple hundred hours on it. After I beat it, I kind of lost interest in it. I mean, the whole end scenario was really cheap, where you fought the brain and had to go into that little portal and keep it open. I had to reload that fight 3 times until I got it. And then when I finally beat it, it wasn't just the fight, or the fact that I had to cheese my way into the last area because there were like 3 ships in turn-based combat who were launching missiles at me and I couldn't avoid them. But even through all that, I just think it's very front loaded. The first act is the only good one, and then the game slowly starts to fall apart. I really think with Larian is they spent so much time in early access on that first act that they didn't really do any, or they didn't do much work on Act 2 or 3. So it was all Act 1. That's where all the excitement is. And once you beat Act 1, the game falls apart. My best friend Toby, he loved the game. He played Act 1 and he loved it. Then he got to Act 2 halfway through it. He quit the game. You know, I asked him why. He's just like, I got bored with it and moved on. That should tell you something. When a guy who's only like 3 years younger than me got bored with it and he moved on to other games, yeah. I'm not bad-mouthing Baldur's Gate 3. I like what it did. It was definitely a step forward for both the genre and Baldur's Gate in general. But I just don't think it was the genre redefining perfect Baldur's Gate game that we needed. I think it's see, you get crucified online if you admit this, so I have to be very sly, right? But I just think I would consider it more a B tier game. And yes, that does mean that I think Order of the Griffin for the TurboGrafx is a better game. I'm sorry, dude. But I just think it's more like a B tier game. It's okay, but because it's so front loaded and it retcons so much and the combat's a little kind of easy and the build creation is so weak. Because you saw my build video I have for this game, right? Where I talk about the dual wielder. Like, I have 20 different builds I can come up with in that game. And I can do videos on all of them. But what does it matter? Because, and I don't mean to diss anybody who likes the game, but the game, you don't really need a build to beat the game. It's just, it's, the combat is made in such a way, all the combat scenarios, that you can cheese your way through everything, so it's kind of pointless. I don't know. I just think it was very front-loaded, and if the game was only the first act, I'd probably give it an A tier, maybe even S, but since the second and third act are so bad, not bad, but just bland, I just give it a B tier. It is what it is. Hate me for it. But, yeah, it's, I think people inflate its important, well, not its importance, but its quality. It is a really good game. It's just, in my opinion, not really that good of a D&D Baldur's Gate game. If that makes sense. So, what would be considered a good D&D game is, let me find box art for it. What would be considered a good D&D game, and one of the best I ever played without question, is Troika's Atari. Well, Atari had very little to do with it, but Troika's Temple of Elemental Evil. I think even today, in 2024, this game came out in 2003, by the way. I think even today, this game holds up. As a matter of fact, it even holds up better than it did when it came out. Because now, because of fan patches and the front end, the Temple Plus front end that came out, it's now completely bug-free. The enemy AI is greatly improved. They drink potions and use spell scrolls and block doors now. So, but even if we don't factor in any of the mods and we just play the base vanilla game with patches, it's still one of the best, if not the best, tactical D&D game ever made. When it came out in 2003, the idea of a turn-based CRPG was an obscene thing. That's why Atari treated Troika like redheaded stepchild. Their words, not mine. Troika even says this to this day. Atari did not like the game because it was turn-based. Atari demanded that the game be real-time, but Troika put their foot down and said, no, we're making turn-based. So there you go. And because they put their foot down, they ended up making one of the best D&D games ever. without a doubt. I think Temple of Elemental Evil to this day still holds up. It's an incredible game that even if you decouple it from the D&D license, it's still great. I mean, it's so tactical, it's long, it's challenging. Um, there are ways to cheese the game, especially the last boss, but even if you do cheese them, it's still difficult to get to them. It's a wonderful game, it really is. There are NPCs you can hire, or you can make your own 5 to 6 man party. There's plenty of quests to do, lots of combat to be had, lots of great loot. There is a story, but you don't have to really partake in it. I've heard some people badmouth this game by saying it doesn't have a story, that one of its weaknesses it's just a combat simulator, and I do get that criticism. I understand it. It is valid. However, I don't give a shit. It's, to me, the most accurate portrayal of Dungeons and Dragons rules that has ever been put forth into a video game. And for that reason, I put it in S tier. So, those are the main D&D games, and I just made my little tier here. I hope you enjoyed it. Like I said, everybody's got an opinion and they're entitled to it, right? So, that's my D&D tier list, my D&D tier games. So I hope you enjoyed it, and yes, that does mean that Baldur's Gate 1, 2, and Temple of Elemental Evil stand alone as the absolute paragons of the genre, of the entire D&D gaming pantheon. So if you've never played any of those 3 games, I highly suggest you get your butt on Steam now and download them. Although with Temple of Elemental Evil, I would get the Temple Plus front end. So I hope you enjoyed it, and hopefully this video isn't as cringe as my previous ones. I'm trying to be less negative and less cringe, but, you know, as a 48-year-old guy that needs to touch some grass and only works all the time, forgive me for being cringe. So anyway, that's my tier list and my opinions. I hope it gave you some ideas of games to play, because that's really what the point of these videos are, is to give you, the gamer, an idea of what to play next. I bet some of you want to play D&D Heroes now too on the Xbox, don't you, after I talked about it? I bet you want to play Order of the Griffin, or Tower of Doom, or Warriors of the Eternal Sun. Or maybe you want to slum it and play some Dungeon Hack. Anyway, hope you enjoy your games and keep adventuring.